All right. Perfect. So we use this, we record these just for our own consultants to use and with our customers. So we will spotlight our view. So are you able to do that, Tennille? If you go participants, click on me and then press spotlight for everyone. And that'll just bring me up onto a big image for all of you guys.
Spotlight video.
And then we will, yeah, perfect. And then we'll swap that back where Tennille. So on the recording, this is all that you can see. We can't see anyone else's faces or anything. So, and we don't share this publicly. So don't worry about it being recorded. All right. So we've got our onion in here. We've got our oil in here. And we're just going to saute that. So 3 minutes, 120 degrees, and on reverse speed 1. So this is not using the high heat. This is just using your normal saute, which you can do in a TM5 or in a TM31. So we're going to saute this down just a little bit, and then we're going to add in the chicken and actually brown it off. So let me go, while this is cooking, what have we got here? What are you guys in here for? Okay, so Megan's only used it for honeycomb. Awesome thing to make. Brooks, you've used it before. We just like coming on to watch, to learn more about it. Here to learn more. Perfect. Okay, and haven't used it. Beautiful. So if there is anybody on here who has a TM5 or a TM31 and you're thinking, what's the difference, or can I do this in mine? Please let us know so that we can cover off those things. But otherwise, I'm going to assume you guys are all over it. You all know about the differences in the TM6. So what happens when it comes to browning or using that high heat function? The TM6, when they made it, had the ability to stop the blade. And this is not something that they could develop in any of the other models. So it is something that is completely unique. And it gives us that ability to have all those different modes and functions that the other machines couldn't have. So that means that the TM6 can get hotter. It can stop and brown and saute. It can use a fermentation mode, a slow cook mode, all of those other things that where the blades actually need to stop, like the rice cooker mode. So what's going to happen is when I start this mode, it is like a normal setting where you set your temperature, your time, and your speed. It is a mode, so it's built in. You can't just use it freestyle whenever you feel like it. It's the one mode that you can't, but it is built into all of your cookie dough recipes. So your cookie dough is built into your TM6. It's always there anyway, and you can go in and select one of the high heat recipes. So if you type into cookie dough high heat, or if you have a look through the collections, there are a few of the high heat collections. And I'm gonna, if we have time, I'll take you in and show you these in a bit more detail. But basically, for that high heat step, it's just going to tell you to put the ingredients in and press start. When you press start, it will rotate the ingredients around, and then it will stop and sizzle. And that's when it's actually browning or caramelizing. And then it will turn a little bit more and it will roll those things over. It'll stop and it'll sizzle again. And so it has been really specifically designed and really, really, really well thought out and tested, so that if the recipe says 3 centimeter pieces and only 200 grams, if you double that, or if you cut those pieces in half the size, they will not brown as effectively, because the recipe is developed to sizzle, turn over, sizzle, turn over, sizzle, turn over, just like you would in a frying pan. So with that being said, these high heat steps you do need to be precise with, and you'll see this when Tennille cooks in a second as well with the sugar stages. But even with this normal browning and caramelizing, you still need to be quite accurate with your ingredients. Otherwise, it just won't work. Your machine's not going to blow up. It's not going to stop or anything like that. But it just, well, you won't get an effective brown on everything like the recipe is intended to. All right. So that's just sauteed. That's just sauteed them down so they're nice and soft. And now we're going to add in 300 grams of chicken breast, cut into about 2 centimeter pieces. So if I go and put that in. Now, if I press next, this is going to say, ensure that the chicken is evenly distributed around the mixing bowl. So seeing how I have just pops that chicken in, and it's all in one big clump. That isn't going to cook effectively using this mode because the blades are not going to keep on turning and they're not going to mix it around properly. So these recipes have been really, really well developed and really tested so that all these bits and pieces of info are there. So mine's nice and distributed around now. I'll pop it back in. We pop our lid on, no measuring cup, and on here it says to put your splash guard on. So your splash guard is this piece, again, unique to the TM6. We press done. And here I have 6 minutes, maximum speed, and it's just saying turn the speed selector to start with a little sizzle icon. So I've just turned that. It's having a little turn right at the moment, and now it's stopped. A little turn, stopped, a little turn, and usually within about 30 seconds, you can start to hear the oil sizzle. Haven't heard it quite yet. There we go. Probably can't hear that through Zoom, but that's already sizzling. So that is how quick and effective the high heat function is. It is really, really cool. And that is the purpose of the splash guard, is to stop that splatter of oil coming up and burning you while you're standing here. All right. So we have 6 minutes here for this to cook. So while this is going, we're going to jump back over to Tennille, and she is going to start us off with her recipe. Now, Tennille, if you are able to, just click on your name and spotlight you, and then we'll be able to see you on a big screen. Beautiful.
Yep. Right. Okay, thanks, Jo. So I'm using the sugar stages mode tonight. And the recipe I'm doing is the sesame snack. So from my week, I've added it to cook today, amongst other things. So honey sesame snacks is what this one's called. So with the sugar stages, it's what you use basically to make caramel and anything that uses sugar at high heat. So we're using that high heat mode, but they just call it sugar stages because it's based on sugar recipes. So if I hit start cooking, it says at the very beginning, to guarantee the success of recipes using sugar mode, the ingredients used must match exactly the quantity and description given. The recipe should also be cooked immediately after placing ingredients in the mixing bowl. Now, I've taken the liberty to deviate only slightly, but it should be okay. Rather than using just sesame seeds, I found a really nice mix at Aldi called Paleo Mix. And this one, it has predominantly seeds, so sunflower kernels, brown linseeds, golden linseeds, pepitas, and raw almonds, and some shredded coconut. And I also had sesame seeds. That's the only thing I've deviated, which should be okay because this is just an add-in at the end of the recipe. What they're really talking about is try not to deviate from the recipe with regards to the amount of sugar, bicarb soda if you're using it, water, because that is going to affect how well your caramel actually works. So if we just hit next, it's asked to line a baking tray, either with a silicone bread mat or baking paper. Now I do have a silicone one here. It's not the Thermomix one from the mix shop because I'm trying to earn those. So these are some cheapy ones I've purchased earlier. But if you don't have any silicone mats, baking paper will work as well. So I've got that ready. If we hit next, it's asking to measure out, I'll get rid of that fly, to measure out our sesame seeds. So it says place a bowl on the lid. And I will just say I've actually already done this. So I had my bowl on top. It said weigh into bowl 250 grams of sesame seeds. So I put my mix in there. And then the next step says place in a frying pan over medium heat or medium high heat and toast your sesame seeds for 3 to 4 minutes until light golden brown. So I have already done that earlier this afternoon. So I could tell it wasn't burnt because my coconuts just got that nicely toasted appearance to it. These are completely cooled down now, so they're ready to use later in the recipe. So if we go next, Now it's asking for the sugar stages part. So it's asking for 350 grams of white sugar. I did weigh all this out previously because I wasn't sure if I was going to get interrupted by my daughter, who hopefully won't come out from the computer room, but if she does, you'll be saying hi to Amelia. So 350 grams of white sugar, that one's in. And now it wants 120 grams of honey. So I have already weighed this one out with a little bit extra just to allow for some of it sticking to the bowl. There we go. So at 122, that should be okay. And then it wants 40 grams of water. So I just leaned on the bench there a little bit. So we'll just pair that. Okay, so I haven't measured this out. I'll just have to watch this as it goes in. Okay, so 41 grams. We should get away with that. Okay, so next we want 2 pinches of salt. So we're just adding a little bit in. And so now it's up to the sugar stages mode. So it says, without measuring cup, next, and it's got 25 minutes on the clock. It says max temperature, and it's a little spoon with what looks like sugar crystals on top. So if we just turn our dial, that's going to activate the sugar stages mode. And at the bottom, it just says caramelizing. So what it's doing now, it is turning the blade. So that's basically mixing the water, honey, and sugar together. But eventually, when that heat gets high enough, the blades will actually stop moving, and it will just use the function of the high heat to melt that caramel. My voice is dropping out. Okay, so I will try not to move. So pretty much now, this is just going to do its caramelization. So bear in mind, it's going to get very hot. So if you've got little kiddies nearby, don't let them come up and touch the bowl. And at the end of this caramelizing process, the next stage is going to be to add a few more ingredients. So it'll ask for butter, some bicarb soda that I've measured out, and then this sesame seed nib. And then it's just going to mix that together for a couple of minutes, and then we'll pour it out onto our tray. But pretty much that's this part of the process done. So really easy to make caramel. You don't have to stand over the stove, getting your temperature right, stirring. It really is a bit of an easy process, and it's a bit worrying how easy it is to make caramel, because that's safe in my household. I actually made some caramel yesterday because I'm in the process of trying to make, from the latest cookbook, the caramel mousse paste. So one of the stages is making caramel and turning it into a powder. I'm just going to jump to the fridge and grab that. So I want to show you how awesome that is. So after making the caramel yesterday out on the mat, I then broke it up, put it back into the Thermomix, and then it milled that caramel. So essentially, I now have a container of caramel powder, which says heaps of it. That's basically, yeah, pure caramel, which looks just like a sugar. Yeah, Beck, it's amazing. So then I use this caramel powder to make essentially it's a creme brulee layer for this cake. So it had all the ingredients in there for custard, but instead of sugar, it had this caramel in there. So the end result was a really nicely flavored caramel custard, which then had some gelatin mixed through that. And then that was set in the freezer. So I've got a nice layer of caramel gelatin mousse type ingredient. That's going to go on the cake. So I'm yet to finish that. Don't have much time in my day, so I'm just going to fit in where I can. But yeah, so that goes to show how easy it is to make that caramel as well. And then you just keep that in your freezer, because any moisture that gets into that is going to make that caramel start to absorb the moisture, and then it will go hard. So keep that in your freezer. That could go in smoothies or normal milkshakes, go into cake. Yeah, it's scary how easy that is. So at the moment, back to what we're doing with the caramelization. That's now stopped turning the blade and that's bubbling away nicely. So we don't have to touch it. It's going to do its thing for the next 23 minutes. And then at the end of that, we'll go to the next stage. And I can
Perfect. All right, good timing. So my high heat has just finished. This has all been browned off. Now, get this off. You can see there, can't see it great through Zoom how it has browned, but what I love is that it is still nice and chunky. Now, this is what you can't do in a TM5 or a TM31. You can't slow those blades down or get them to stop. And you can never get this consistency with your meat. It always gets a little bit chopped up or shredded because you can't control that blade. And if you look right now on the bottom, see how it's all brown? That's all of that caramelization. That's what gives it the flavor. So this says now to place a simmering basket into a large bowl. So I have my thermoserver here with a simmering basket in it. And I'm going to transfer the chicken to the simmering basket and drain the meat juices into here. So I'm literally going to tip the whole lot in. And you can see that on the bottom. That looks like a real fry pan, doesn't it? All right. And now we're going to pop in 400 grams of mixed peppers cut into pieces. So I have used mostly capsicum, but I've got a little bit of zucchini in there because I didn't quite have enough. So I'm just going to pop that in there. And then I've got about 20 grams of olive oil. And put that in as well. And then we're going to pop on our splash guard and let that brown too. So same situation here. One turn and it's going to cook away. So you've got 7 minutes here now while that browns off those peppers. So I want to get a little bit of an idea here. For those of you who have used the high heat before, what have you cooked? Have any of you tried anything using the sugar stages? And have any of you tried any of the main dishes? Have you ever browned chicken or anything like that? I know that there was a couple of comments early on that you have used it before. Sedentary bow is a massive winner. It certainly is. But what's the general? How much have you used it before? So what often happens, I'll let you guys put that into the chat, but what often happens is once you have browned, as you can see in my bowl there, it's left with that browning on the bottom. So when you have all this, think about the surface area of your Thermomix bowl, and you're trying to replicate what you could get on a fry pan or a barbecue into here. So it's going to be a little bit different. And that's why it's important that you stick to the quantities that the recipe is asking for. But also your recipe will ask you at different stages to scrape the bottom of the bowl and release the caramelization. It asks that during the century bow. It's really important that you follow that recipe and you do that step. If you don't, you will end up with burnt pieces on the bottom of your bowl. You won't just get caramelized, but you'll end up with burnt. So think of when you're cooking in the fry pan and you scratch around the bottom of your meat all the time, don't you? You scratch around it and you shuffle it and you flip it over. And if you left some of your meat just cooking for the next half an hour, it would end up burnt on the bottom, right? So it's the same story with this. So when you are scraping the bottom of your bowl, you've got your spatula nice and hard on the bottom and you're scraping around your blades like this. Now, there is a sharp and a blunt side of your blades. Don't cut your fingers, but if you put your fingers in and feel the blades, there's a blunt and a sharp side. That's where your reverse and your forward comes from, right? So if you put your spatula in and you turn around clockwise and you scrape the bottom, you are going around that blunt side of the blade. If you go back the other way, you're going against the sharp side. So keep in mind when you are scraping the bottom in the caramelization mode, if you keep going back against the sharp side of your blades, you will often get little nicks in your spatula. Okay, so go around it clockwise and against that blunt side, and do all of your scraping off the bottom that way, and then you won't actually get any little nicks in your spatula. It'll all stay really nice. Okay, does that make sense? Yeah, give me a thumbs up. Yeah, okay, perfect. So that's really, really important. Now, the other thing is when the TM6s were first released and we all started to play around with this caramelization, we went back to Thermomix and said, oh, it's leaving this burnt stuff on the bottom and it's really hard to clean off at the end. I don't think the recipes are right. And we had some really big chefs that were working with Thermomix, like Matt Sinclair, off MasterChef, has his own restaurants, top chef. And he got on a Zoom with us and said, do you know what? If you're not getting browning on the bottom, caramelizing on the bottom of your bowl, food isn't going to taste caramelized. That's what gives it the flavor. The flavor is in that caramelization. And so if you're not seeing it on the bottom of your bowl, it's not having the effect. So don't be worried by it. It's actually really, really important. So that is where the browning or caramelization stages have come into the pre-clean. So when you click on your pre-clean screen, there's 4 different settings. There's dough universal, there's fat or caramel, and browning. So it's designed that browning stage, you pop your water in and it will actually stop and soak your bowl. And then it will take off and give it a wash, but it's a really long clean. And it heats the water to, I can't remember the exact degrees, but it's quite hot. So it heats the water, it soaks, it washes, it soaks, it washes, gives it a really good clean to help you get it off. If you still find that there's a little bit left on the bottom and it's tricky to get off, please don't take to it with a metal scourer because you will scratch your bowl. The best thing to use are these Euro Scrubbies. So you can buy these in the mix shop. They are like a non-stick scourer. You can buy big ones and you can buy little ones. They don't cost very much, but they are really, really safe to use. So you can put this in here and obviously take your blades out. But if you have a patch there that is a little bit stuck, maybe it was a bit that you didn't scrape around properly, it's got a little bit burnt on there, just pop this in and give it a really, really good scrub, all right? But during your recipe, don't be worried that there is a bit stuck on the bottom. For instance, the beef tacos. You'll go through and you'll brown your meat and then you will cook the rest. So you'll cook your mushrooms and the rest, and then you throw your meat all back in to cook it at the end. Don't stress if there is brown left on the bottom and you've got to keep going and cooking, because that is what will put the flavor through everything else. And also your top chefs have a word that they use for their fry pans, and that's called seasoned. And their fry pans are not seasoned until they have been browned. So browning at the beginning of a recipe and then going ahead and cooking layer after layer on top of that browning is actually a technique that they use to help with flavor. So it is there for a reason. Don't be put off by it, and just keep on going with it, okay? If you get stuck, use your Euro Scrubby. And I can see here in the chat, gumption and a soft cloth also works. Sprinkle bicarb and then pour vinegar over. Put it in the dishwasher works too. Yes, lots of good tips in there. If all else fails, use a Euro Scrubby. Keep in mind when you're using that, the fat or caramel or the browning pre-clean, don't put dishwashing liquid in before the pre-clean. It will bubble over. The dishwashing liquid isn't, it reacts differently when the water gets heated that much and it can bubble over. So don't do that. Put a little bit of vinegar in instead. Just a little bit of vinegar, and that it won't bubble over, but it'll still have that same effect. Or any of those other ways are all really, really good. All right. So my capsicums here are all ground off. If I pull these up, again, a bit tricky to see. You can see like my bottom is getting browner and browner. There's more and more there. And sometimes when you're cooking these, you might think there isn't an awful lot of browning on the individual items. So that piece of capsicum there doesn't actually look like it's been browned as it would on a barbecue. But it doesn't actually need to get that brown to look at in order to release that flavor. It's just a matter of hitting a temperature to release that flavor. And if you don't believe me, try some of these recipes, because I promise you, sand choy bao in your TM6 is out of this world compared to any flavors you can get in your TM5. And it is that release of flavor when that meat hits that certain degree. Even though it may not look like it's been browned all that much, it really changes the flavor. And you see this in a lot of the recipes in a TM6 where it browns the onions at the start and that sort of thing. The whole dish just has a little bit different flavor to what you can get in your TM5 because it's released that caramelization. Even though your onions might not be all completely browned, it really does change the flavor. So it is a personal taste thing. If that isn't important to you, you might have a big family and you're thinking, we don't care, we just want dinner, then don't worry too much about these stages and keep them for something else. But that is the big game changer there. All right, now we're going to put this back on and we're going to throw in the rest of our things. So we have 200 grams of water. We've got 200 grams of tomatoes. Now, I like this to be a little bit more saucy than what it is. And also tomatoes are not in season. So I'm not going to go and buy tomatoes specifically for this. I'm going to use a can and I'm actually going to throw the whole lot in here. So these high heat stages are finished for now. I can go ahead now and adjust my recipe as much as I want. I'm not locked into quantities, just like any of your normal cooking. So I can double it now. I can, do whatever and just adjust my own cook times. It is just for those specific steps where you're using that high heat mode that you want to stick to them. All right. So I'm going to throw that whole can of tomatoes in. And we've got the rest of our chicken. So this recipe uses 500 grams of chicken, but you only brown off 300 grams at the start. Browning off that little bit means that you can do it nice and quickly. 500 grams is a little bit too much. It doesn't brown very effectively. 300 grams does. So you brown off that much and the rest of it just gets cooked through and that flavor will just transfer through the whole dish. So I'm going to put in the rest of my chicken. And now we've got the reserved meat juices. So remember how I had my thermo server with my steaming basket and I have all of this. Now, what this is, you're probably thinking this is a bit of an odd set. This is where all the flavor is from the chicken because this is where it's been browned and all those juices and flavors have come out. So I'm going to tip this back in here and it's going to flavor the rest of the dish. All right. Now, we're going to put in a teaspoon of hot paprika and half a teaspoon of sweet paprika. Now, I don't want this hot, so I'm just going to pop in a big teaspoon of sweet paprika, a teaspoon of basil, and a teaspoon of oregano. I'm just going to guess these. You can add whatever herbs you like in here, depending on your flavors. A little bit of salt, some pepper, And now, either a chicken stock cube or a heaped teaspoon of chicken stock paste. I only have a little bit of stock paste left, so I'm just going to scrape out what I have left in here. I'll have to go and make some more. The last little bit in here will do. And this is where you get all of the flavour in your dish. All right. And then some red pepper paste or tomato puree. Now remember, this isn't an Aussie recipe, which is why it's not calling it with tomato paste as such. It's calling it tomato puree, but just tomato paste. So this is what's going to give it that nice rich tomatoey flavour. And then we're going to stir that all together with the spatula. So you can see they're all my ingredients. Give it a bit of a stir. And we're going to pop our lid on. And there's your cup in. And that's going to cook for 15 minutes at 100 degrees reverse stirring speed. So really, really, really slowly cook through. All right. Now, while that is going, the recipe now tells you that while this is cooking, to go ahead and cook some rice on the stove. But instead of actually cooking it on the stove, I've cooked mine in the rice cooker mode. So on my second TM6 over here, I have my rice cooker mode going. And I've already got a few minutes left. So we did a rice cooker mode a couple of weeks ago. So just using that rice cooker mode, I've popped in my rice, I've popped in my water, I've popped in a little bit of stock and olive oil. And this is nearly finished. Now this is another mode where the blades stop. The blades are not turning and the machine is just cooking like a standalone rice cooker, where you just throw your rice and your water in and you just tell it to cook and it will cook it to perfection. It is much the same using that rice cooker mode. So this is nearly finished, but in the meantime, how is yours going over there, Tennille? Oh, we can't hear you.
I've got 5.5 minutes to go of the caramelization. Oh. Hold up.
No worries. Well, while we have a minute there, I might quickly take you into Cookie Doo and just show you a couple of the recipes and you guys like to help you get a little bit more out of this high heat function. Can you quickly swap me back over to host if that's okay? And I will share the Oh, good. All right. So let's go. Now, I can't see what you guys are popping in the chat box while I'm in here, so please just shout it out so I don't miss anything. All right. So when you're into Cookie Doo, if you go across to your search tab, this is one really good way to get the most out of it. So you might be feeling like you want to use, that high heat, but you don't necessarily want to cook all of the dishes. So what you can do is if you type in high heat, you have all of these sort of collections. Now, something like cooking with high temp, this is where you'll find your meals that are using it, which is really awesome. There are some really good ones. That sticky chili beef is delicious, and that's the chicken with peppers and rice that we're cooking tonight. But there's some really good ones in there. But these here, like high heat basics with onions. So you might be thinking, I just want to barbecue some onions to have with lunch. I don't want to go and do a full recipe. You can just jump in and barbecue some onions or saute some leek or do any of these things without doing a full recipe. You can also jump in here and use this vegetable function. So you've got so many different options here. Sometimes in the morning for breakfast, I'll just throw in some sauteed mushrooms. I let the Thermomix take control and do all of that while I go and cook my eggs or do whatever I need to do. And it just takes control of that. You've got sauteed capsicum there, eggplant, lots of different veggies. And then you have things here like your meat and seafood. So again, you might think, I love that it browns chicken, but I want to use that in something that I already make, or I want to brown the chicken in a stir fry that I do in the Thermomix, something like that. You can jump in here and go browned beef. I want to use that recipe and then continue on so that my meat can still be brown and still get those flavors throughout my normal Thermomix dish. So this is where you could go in here and pull out these individual things and use them and sort of, mix them with your other recipes. So it's a really, really cool way to cook. You've got another vegetable ones there, and you've got chicken and that sort of thing. So there's sort of different ones there. So if I go back here to individual recipes, you can see these are a lot of those ones from those collections. And some other ones down there as well. But that's the best way to find those real essentials, is just have a look at those individual collections, and they were all designed to help you get the most out of the modes. So if you do have a recipe that you think, I wish that it would brown, you can jump across and brown it using one of these other little recipes and then jump back into your recipe and finish it off. All right. Did that explain that very well? Yeah. Yes, perfect. All right, question time. While we have a minute here, what questions have you got so far? Is there anything that you've seen that you're thinking, oh, wow, I've got a really big question about that? Or something that you're thinking, I want to go ahead and try that now that I've seen it? How are you feeling so far without seeing the full end result? Where are you at now as opposed to when you jumped in? Can we do high heat not on auto cook? No. So the high heat is not just a function that you can access and freestyle. The reason for that is mainly safety for you, but also for the Thermomix. So looking at the browning on the bottom of the bowl and that sort of thing, and that's coming from really well developed recipes, then you can imagine if you just freestyled the sort of mess that you'd end up with on the bottom of your bowl. It also would be, I feel, would be quite ineffective in terms of trial and error, because I know when these were developed that there was a lot of trial and error from our recipe development kitchen and all of that sort of thing.
Excuse me, Jo?
Yes?
Can you hear me now? We're just at the next stage. Can I put back on?
Go.
Great, thanks. So that's finished the caramelisation. I'm not going to show it to you because that's really hot. So the next few steps happen, or you need to kind of work quickly. So it's asking for salted butter, 20 grams. I didn't have salted, so I just chucked a bit of salt in. Hopefully that's all right. So popping that in now. Then it's got 1/4 teaspoon of bicarb soda. So I'm going to pop this in. There's going to be a little bit of foaming up with that. And then it's asking for vanilla. That's actually bubbling away, so I'll just kind of work quickly here. And then the sesame seeds. My moment of truth, whether my switcheroo is going to be a good or a bad thing. So now it's asking for the lid and the measuring cup. Next, just for 40 seconds. So this is putting it back to 100 degrees, speed 2. For 40 seconds, it says mixing until completely combined for a long time if necessary. Just going to push this back so you can see this coming out from the bench because it's going to set very quick. Hopefully you can see that there. Yep. And when you're scraping this out, it does say just to try to get it off the rim of the bowl because you need to be able to get the lid back on to do the cleaning, the pre-clean mode, the fat or caramel one. It's got 4 seconds. Now it's saying immediately pour it onto the tray. So we're just going to try and get this out as quick as I can. And then we'll try and spread it out. How good does that caramel look? Oh, it's setting quite quickly. So it does say to get it out to like 5 millimeters. Obviously, don't touch this. It's going to be extremely hot. I've got mine pretty thick. I have to admit, it's the first time I'm making this recipe. But I have done caramel. Anyway, we get most of it out. Oh, you can see that caramel sort of setting there. I'm going to have to give that a quick wipe down. And then just try to quickly spread this out a bit thinner. He's asking for 5 millimeters, just so it's easier to cut. Oh, anyway, I think that should be all right. What it does is it asks us to sort of cut through this before it fully sets. So after about 10 minutes, it'll say to use a sharp knife, but as I'm on my silicone mat, I'm not going to use a sharp knife. I'm just going to use my pastry dough cutter. So before that sets on the edge of this bowl, I've got a wet cloth. I probably left it too late already actually. Just give it a little bit of a wipe down just to dissolve that sugar, because this will take us to the next step, which is basically using that pre-clean mode just to clean this bowl. So if you can imagine doing this in your saucepan, all that caramel has set pretty hard on the inside already. So I'm just going to move to the next step. Oh, actually, no, it hasn't set. Oh, that's good. We'll get some more out. Just put it on the silicone. Don't really want to waste that caramel if I can help it. This little silicone spatula is available from the mix shop. This can just get in and under the blades really nicely as well. So I quite like this one. Anyway, I think we'll leave that in the bowl now. Just going to switch to the cleaning mode. So it's saying leave this to set for 10 minutes, and that's when I'll use my little cutter just to kind of score through it so that it's easy to break apart later. And then the next part is the cleaning mode. So I actually just pre-measured all this out. This is like 1 litre of water and 50 grams of vinegar. So I'm just going to pop that in now. And then this is going to immediately clean that for us. Well, not immediately, but because I can get the lid on a bit easier now. And we just start that pre-clean. So you'll probably hear the blades move and then stop because there is caramel on the bottom, but when it gets enough dissolving going on just to be able to rotate, then you'll hear the blades start to spin a bit more. But basically, look.
And that has the pre-cleaning where you put it on and with water and vinegar and it cleans itself.
Yeah. So that's really hot, but basically that's looks pretty cool. That's my sesame and paleo mix sugar snap or honey sugar snaps, whatever. I'm going to give it maybe, 10 more minutes, and then I'm just going to use this to score it. And then it says leave it for a full hour, and then you can use those score lines just to snap it. So you've got like some nice pieces. But it's really tempting to lick that, and I have to keep telling myself it is really hot. Don't do that. But anyway, that was pretty easy. Like I didn't really have to do much. I just shoved all that stuff in there, let it melt it, caramelize it, mix it all together, and we've got some pretty tasty looking sweets there. which will cut up nice, and you can do that as gifts for people, or you could just eat it yourself at your own expense. All righty. Thank you, Joe. If you want to take over again, and you can carry on with the rest of your cook.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you. All right. I absolutely love those sugar stages. I don't know how much cooking you guys have done, but I would love to know in the chat now, how much cooking have you done like this? Sugar stages, any sort of caramels, toffees, honeycombs, anything using like a high heat sort of sugar stage at home. How many of you done this? How many of you have done this conventionally? No sugar stuff. What about conventionally? Have you ever cooked anything on a saucepan? Have we got any chefy cooks in here who like to cook like that? I have worked in toffee sauce for desserts. Yes, awesome, awesome. Keep them coming if you've cooked anything else. I have worked in a few in restaurants my whole life, and this is something that the chefs pride themselves on, is being able to be good at these sort of things. It's a real skill to learn, and you have to have all the equipment to cook things at home. And those chefs love they love this sort of stuff. You know, it's really their, if it's something they're passionate about, then they absolutely love playing around with the flavors and the caramel and that sort of thing. So being able to take that, such a refined skill, and something that is just so hard to do at home in a not commercial kitchen, then being able to just do it in Thermomix and have anybody who doesn't know anything about cooking just be able to cook these sauces and honeycombs and caramels and snaps is really quite amazing. It's stuff that I watch chefs do, and I never ever would have even attempted to do this stuff at home, because I saw how hard it was. I saw how hard it was and how many mistakes and how often they, you know, didn't turn out right, whatnot. And now this is stuff that I just do all the time. It's so easy to do, and it's all been triply tested, so I know that it's all going to work. And Brooke, you are a chef. Awesome. Okay, cool. That's really, really cool. Beautiful. Okay, so there's a few bit of stuff coming through there. Becky used to make honeycomb at home. Toffee cups. Awesome. All right. So this is my chicken, almost finished. Now, while that was cooking, it asked me to dissolve some corn flour and water and make a paste. And now we're going to add that corn flour in. So I love to use my measuring cup for this because it's one less thing that I need to wash up. So I just take off my measuring cup, mix it up in there. And then we're going to pop back in our chicken that we browned at the beginning. Our chicken and our onions. So pop them in. Whoops. All right, and then we're going to put our lid back on, and that's just going to cook for another 2 minutes and just mix through that ground chicken. Now, while Tennille was finishing off hers, my rice finished. So for any of you who are wondering what the rice cooker mode is like and how well your rice turns out at the end, this is the end result. So this is beautiful fluffy rice. How well you can guys see that. But it is absolutely perfect. And it uses the absorption method. So stock, bone broth, any flavors that you want to have really go through your rice. It works so much more effectively to use the absorption method of the rice cooker mode rather than boiling your rice where it's just getting washed through the water. So I love to use a bone broth or a stock or something like that. It works really, really well, and it gives your rice a beautiful flavor too. Or of course you can just boil it. Just use a little salt or whatever. If you have got a veggie or a chicken or a beef stock that you've made in your thermi, it's a really good chance to just pop in a little bit of that instead of the salt. And it really adds a beautiful flavour through your rice. so much more flavour than what you'd get if you were just to tip it in the mixing bowl when you had your rice in the steaming basket. And it really gives your rice a real edge. So it's a really, really good thing to do. How many of you have used your rice cooker mode? Pop it into the chat box. No, you can see some shaking heads. Yes, fantastic. We did all the time, beautiful. We did a Zoom on this just the other week, so I hope some of you have gone and tried it. Not yet, you have to try it. It's really, really cool. Beautiful. All right, 18 seconds left. This is going to be all finished. I'm going to pop this into my thermo server, and we're just coming up to an hour, so we're right on time. So what did you think of those sesame snaps? Who's going to go ahead and try them? Excellent, fantastic. Are any of you inspired to give them a go? There's also things like your peanut brittle, your caramel sauces and things like that. The sugar stages is so much different to just the normal caramel sauce you can make in a TM5. The salted caramel sauce, the TM6, is incredible. You don't need to worry about working fast at the end. So if you thought that looked a little bit intimidating, don't worry. The caramel sauce you don't need to be fast at the end. You just tip everything in, and what it does is that caramel sauce is really hard to cook, because if you hit just a couple of degrees over the temp, it'll start to burn the sugars and it won't taste any good. It'll taste burnt. And if you don't quite get it hot enough, it won't set. And that's where it ends up like the TM5 caramel sauce that stays forever a runny sauce. You can't actually get it properly thick. So the TM6 one will take it to the perfect degree, and then it will let it bubble. And you'll be able to watch. You can look through the hole in your mixing bowl lid, and you can see it just bubbling away at the perfect temperature. And then it will tell you to add in a couple more things and then pop it into a jar, and it's all finished. And it really is the most amazing caramel sauce that you can make at home. So if you're not too sure about the sugar stages, please go and try something, whether it be sauce, a toffee, a honeycomb, the sesame snaps. Please go and try it. And I would like, before you all hop off tonight, for you to pop into the chat box what you're going to try, because we love you guys getting on the Zoom, but we want to know that you are really learning from them and that you are going out and trying things. So whether it be something savory, something using the sugar stages, please pop it into the chat box before you hop off and let us know what you are going to cook using the high heat. All right, this is finished. So here we have a big pot. I love this because it is just so different to a TM5 dish, with it being so chunky. So this is breast, and it hasn't broken up at all because it browned. So all of that brown chicken has stayed nice and chunky. And the other stuff has broken up a little bit as it stirred, but most of your chicken is nice and chunky. Your capsicum, and then you have the browned onions in there. So it is really quite different to any of the dishes you can do in your TM5. And I'm going to tip this in. Now remember, mine's a little bit extra saucy because I have to use the whole tin of tomatoes. But that's okay. Now I'm going to show you guys the bottom of my bowl. So just like Tennille, she went straight into the pre-clean. It's something that you can do with this as well. So see that bowl? Now that looks very different, I think, through Zoom as well to how it looks in person. But that is quite, it is quite stuck on the bottom. I can scratch that with my spatula and there is a little bit more coming off. But the best thing I can do now is just pop some water in here, a little bit of vinegar, or vinegar is probably what I'll pop in, a little bit of vinegar, and I'll just pop it onto that browning clean and let it give it a good clean. All right. When it's all finished, I'll just give it a wash up or use my Euro Scrubby or any of those other techniques that we'll put into the chat box, and that'll be my bowl all cleaned off. This is my dish, and there is my rice. So that's dinner done. This is going to serve the heat. There's a lot of rice there and a big meal of this. It's all been done in just under an hour, and most of that was all hands-free cooking. So this is a pretty good meal. It smells delicious. Tomorrow night's dinner, I don't think it will last dinner, probably tomorrow night's lunch. Tomorrow's lunch. But no, otherwise tomorrow's dinner, definitely. That is the big advantage of doing these Zooms, is we get to cook our meals ahead of time.
Hey, Joe, I just wanted to show you how well that bowl came up after that pre-clean. If anyone can see that.
Let me just turn the spotlight on. There you go.
Pretty much very little to clean, just this stuff around the edge here. Otherwise, the whole bowl, there's no caramel to get off that. I will not have to scrub that at all. It'll just be that outer edge. So that pre-clean mode is the bomb for caramel cleaning. Thanks.
Is that a little bit different, Leonie, to when you make your toffees at home in your saucepan?
Yum, yum.
So that's so good.
Cool.
Hell yeah. Yes. And this is, again, huge advantage to doing it in your Thermomix. Even with your, honeycomb, any of those sugar stages, to be able to just pop that pre-clean on, leave it for a couple of minutes and come back to that. Literally just tipping some sugar water down the sink, and then you just have that little bit at the spout to clean off. You've thrown pots out. Oh, that's terrible. Well, you won't have to anymore. No more throwing pots out. And that is a really, really good example, Leonie, of just how hard it is to do this sort of cooking conventionally. It's not just the flavour that you will ruin, going a little bit over or a little bit too hot or just a few degrees out, but you'll wreck entire pots. Also, going back to Andrew's question earlier of being able to freestyle this high heat yourself and not use a cookie dough recipe, that's also why. Imagine if you could freestyle that high heat and you burnt your bowl so badly you had to throw it out. It'd be pretty devastating, wouldn't it? So that is why at this stage, the high heat is locked into the cookie dough recipes, and they are tried. That would suck. That's right. And they are tried and tested. Things may change in the future with cookie dough. We never know. They're always coming up with new things. But for now, they are part of the recipe, and I think it really is the best option for everyone. You can always take it and change little things. You can change the type of sugar. You can add different amounts of different things and that sort of stuff. But stick to those general quantities, and then you'll be absolutely fine. You just could not be bothered to clean the toppy off. No, I absolutely understand. Well, you won't have to worry about that anymore. Definitely give the sugar stages a go in your Thermomix, and then just click on that pre-clean and let it do all the work. Fantastic. All right. Any questions before we finish up? I have seen a few recipes come there in the chat box, but if you haven't popped it in yet, what are you going to go and cook with the high heat? We would love to know before you jump off. We have got our community group. So, Tash, if you're still on, are you able to pop in our group, our Facebook group, into the chat? And if you do cook something using a high heat, we'd love to see what you cook. So take a photo, pop it into the group and let us know what you cooked and how it went. And if you have any troubles, if you try it and it doesn't work properly, or you come across something, please let us know. Go to your consultant and say, look, this didn't work, help me with it, because it's really, really important that you're getting the most out of it. So let us know how you go with it. Tasha just put the group there into the chat box. So you can click on that group, join us and show us what you are cooking. We love to see. Beautiful. Can we temper chocolate, Zoom? Sure. Tempering chocolate is really easy to do in your Thermomix, but there's a few key points. And if you don't get them right, then you won't get the chocolate to temper. So that is definitely something we can add in. I'll add that onto the list. Not a problem at all. All right. Any more questions? Throw them at us. But other than that, I want to say a big thank you to Tennille for jumping on and cooking. That is an awesome recipe that you made, and I'm so thankful that you jumped on and cooked. For Tash and Beck for jumping in the chat, and for everybody else who jumped on to watch and support tonight, thank you. We love showing you guys, and we love seeing you get a little bit more out of your Thermomix. So please keep sharing with us what you're cooking and how it's all going and anything that we can help you with. We love to know. So keep us updated. I'm going to stop this recording.